Trump launched something called Save America PAC, ostensibly to raise money to fight the stolen election. He raised hundreds of millions of dollars from his supporters to stop the steal, except it's not where the money all went. Here's how one of the January 6th investigators laid it out in a public hearing earlier this month.
Between Election Day and January 6th, the Trump campaign sent millions of fundraising emails to Trump supporters, sometimes as many as 25 a day. They continued to barrage small-dollar donors with emails, encouraging them to donate to something called the Official Election Defense Fund. The Select Committee discovered no such fund existed. The claims that the election was stolen were so successful, President Trump and his allies raised $250 million, nearly $100 million in the first week after the election. On November 9th, 2020, President Trump created a separate entity called the Save America PAC. Most of the money raised went to this newly created PAC, not to election-related litigation. The Select Committee discovered that the Save America PAC made millions of dollars of contributions to pro-Trump organizations, including $1 million to Trump Chief of Staff Mark Meadows' charitable foundation, $1 million to the America First Policy Institute, a conservative organization which employs several former Trump administration officials, $204,857 to the Trump Hotel Collection, and over $5 million to Event Strategies, Inc., the company that ran President Trump's January 6 rally on the Ellipse.
Throughout the committee's investigation, we found evidence that the Trump campaign and its surrogates misled donors as to where their funds would go and what they would be used for. So not only was there the big lie, there was the big ripoff.
The big ripoff. So Donald Trump's been raising all this money, hundreds of millions of dollars, by promising supporters that he can still win the 2020 election or something. But in fact, lots of the money is just lining his and his friends' pockets. And now we have reason to worry that some of the money might be being spent in more insidious ways, because here is what the Congresswoman who you just heard, Congresswoman Zoe Lofgren, who sits on the January 6th committee, told me last night.
We know that large amounts of money have been spent out of the fund that was amassed by the former president and is being used to pay for lawyers to various witnesses. The potential for coercion in that case is pretty obvious.
What the Congresswoman is describing there is a neat trick. Donald Trump raises all this money supposedly to try to overturn the 2020 election results. Then along comes this giant investigation into his attempts to overturn the election. So Donald Trump uses that big pile of money to pay for lawyers for all the people who used to work for him who are being subpoenaed by that very investigation. And you may not be a lawyer, I certainly am not, but you don't have to have a law degree to understand why it might be, in the Congresswoman's words, coercive for Trump to be paying for witnesses' lawyers. Imagine you are, say, Cassidy Hutchinson, a White House staffer subpoenaed by the January 6th investigation, and Donald Trump is paying for your lawyer. Well, whose own interests is your lawyer serving, yours or Trump's? And hanging over your head at all times is the possibility that if you displease Trump somehow, he might cut off the money and you'll lose your representation. Today, one of Cassidy Hutchinson's former White House colleagues said that it was her understanding that when Ms. Hutchinson first testified behind closed doors months ago, she was represented by a lawyer paid for by Trump or his allies.
Cassidy actually came to me and said, there's more I want to share with the committee. A couple months ago, I put her in touch with Congresswoman Cheney. She got a new lawyer, and that's how this testimony came about.
She came to you and said she had more even after she'd spoken to them once?
Yeah, so what people need to understand is Trump World was assigning lawyers to a lot of these staffers who themselves, don't have big...
Assigning lawyers?
Well, I should say covering the cost of lawyers for people who don't have big legal defense funds to themselves.
So they were paying Cassidy Hutchinson's lawyer?
Is my understanding. You'd have to confirm that, but she had someone, Stefan Passantino, who'd been in the White House counsel's office, is still aligned with Trump World. She did her interview. She complied with the committee, but she shared with me, there is more I want to share that was not asked in those settings. How do we do this? And in that process, she got a new attorney of her own.
Well, the name that the former White House staffer there was searching for was Passantino. Stefan Passantino. He was Cassidy Hutchinson's lawyer until about a month ago. He's a former Trump White House lawyer with all kinds of Trump world connections. Was he being paid by Trump to represent Ms. Hutchinson? Well, we don't know that. We reached out to Mr. Passantino today, but we've not heard back. But what we do know is that a law firm Stefan Passantino runs has been getting regular payments of tens of thousands of dollars from that very same Trump Save America PAC. Here are the payments from Trump's Save America PAC to Passantino's firm, Elections LLC, for the last year and a half for legal consulting. Payments ranging from $10,000 to $45,000 multiple times a month. Now, to be entirely clear, Mr. Passantino is a lawyer. It's entirely possible that all this money he's getting from Trump's PAC is for actual legal services rendered that have nothing to do with representing Cassidy Hutchinson. Again, we've reached out to Mr. Passantino, and we haven't heard anything back. But you've got to admit, if you're a witness before the January 6th investigation and your lawyer is getting regular payments from Donald Trump's quasi-slush fund PAC, that creates an awkward situation. It may explain why Cassidy Hutchinson became so much more forthcoming once she switched lawyers about a month ago. Makes you wonder if there are other witnesses who are repped by lawyers being paid by Trump or Trump World or the super PAC, and what they might be willing to say under different circumstances if they had their own lawyers, or at least lawyers who are not paid for by Trump or his allies. I can tell you that FEC records show payments from that same Trump PAC, Save America, to law firms representing several other January 6th witnesses. Again, doesn't mean those payments are specifically tied to the representation of those witnesses. Someone else might be paying for those witnesses. Those witnesses might be paying their own bills. We don't know that information yet. But you can understand why January 6th investigators would be very interested in that information, following the money. Especially when the committee's already put forward evidence of witness intimidation by Trump allies, messages to witnesses that appear to be veiled threats, reminding witnesses that Trump is watching and urging them to, quote, do the right thing. Here's what Congresswoman Zoe Lofgren told me last night about that.
I'm not going to comment on which witness those threatening messages were sent to, but obviously if you read them, there's an intent to dissuade a witness from testifying honestly. So this is a concern. And I just want people who would try and interfere with a witness, who would coerce them or threaten them to know that that's not legal. And we do not intend to just sit by and watch that happen. As to witness intimidation, that's a crime. And if individuals who are trying to protect the president are committing a crime, we intend to take the evidence that we get of that and not just sit on it. People ought to be aware that committing the crime of witness tampering is a serious matter, and it's not going to be ignored.
Now, Donald Trump and his allies like to claim that the January 6th investigation is a ridiculous sideshow that they're not even paying attention to. But it sure seems like behind the scenes, they're working pretty hard to keep witnesses from saying too much or saying what they don't want them to say.